Hello, my name is T-Rex, and welcome to my podcast show called Something Positive. Each week, I'm very lucky I get to speak to some amazing people who at times have gone through some very challenging life situations, but not everyone. The one thing in common with everyone I do speak with is they want to be able to share some of the positive angles and silver linings that they've learned throughout life. So tune in and remember, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Welcome, Natalie. Welcome to my podcast this morning. How is your Saturday morning going so far?
Hi, P. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been a lovely Saturday morning. It's been a very calm and slow one. I try and calm it down on the weekends because we're always rushing during the week. So, yeah, all good. Thank you. How's yours been?
Good. I said this in my last podcast. I'm not really a morning person per se, but it takes me a little while to get going. So I think like now is the right time. It's about 11 o'clock here in the UK. So I think my brain is starting to open up. But if we had this like call or this session around 9 a.m., I would have been completely zombified. So it's all good.
Yes, definitely. I need at least half an hour from waking up to getting up, and then I need a coffee, and then
same. I'm absolutely a grizzly bear usually. If I don't have my coffee, right, it's like, please, like claws come out. No, I'm just joking, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is actually also very close to my heart, because of what you have experienced in life, from the side of being a single parent. Now, when I mean single parent, doesn't mean I am not a single parent. I don't have children, however you do. And why this topic is really close to me is because that's what my mom went through when my mom, kind of became a single parent, because at the age of 8, I lost my father. And she had to, raise 2 small children, and that was a lot. I remember, from a child to now being a 45-year-old, I'm able to look at things from, different angles and see how much a survivor she was and things like that, and the hardships she's gone through. But I want to talk to you because you can help me understand my mother as well, like in a sense that you can help me understand what it's like as a mother, right, to have gone through something like that. And so that's from my side. And I also think I wanted to add as well, because I viewed my mother, and my mother is still alive, thank God, and everything like that. To my eyes, she's a superwoman. And I know I've only spoken to you a couple times, but I also see you've got that similarity, you've got that superwomanness in you. And I think that's really amazing to be able to talk to you today about this, I think, very important subject. I think there'll be plenty of people, coming in, listening in, and who hopefully will be able to relate to you as well in some ways. And hopefully this will be a lovely conversation where people at the end of this session will feel like, they've learned something, and they can maybe hopefully take that away and see a positive angle in some things as well. Now, that's a lot from me at this moment. I'm going to get you to talk as well. So before we move on to the topic, can you tell us a bit about yourself in terms of, who you are, what you do today, and, kind of your life story in a way?
Yes, of course. So me today, I'm approaching 40. I'm a mum of 2 beautiful girls. My eldest is 22 this year, and my youngest will be 12. They are 10 years apart, and it's amazing, but it's chaos as well. For me, Natalie, I work full time. I also have a jewelry brand, and I love to just share my experiences and who I am through what I do. So I love creating content, and I love to just kind of give people that uplifting, I don't know, it's like, I want to say love, but I feel like, I just want people to feel themselves and be themselves. And I try and do that through everything I put out there. And that's kind of what I do with everything, actually, even at work in the office. I try and always put a positive output on things. There's nothing wrong with being negative, though. I think that's another thing to acknowledge, is it's okay to have a negative or a low moment or a down moment. Acknowledge yourself. Don't gaslight yourself. So yeah, that's kind of how I live my day to day. I think it's just surrendering to things that happen on a day to day, and allowing yourself to feel, and allowing yourself to be yourself as well. That's kind of my key focus or output every day, really. Yeah.
Well, it really does shine, Natalie. Like, I know you're on TikTok as well. I think I've met all of my guests so far on TikTok, which is absolutely wonderful because there's such a variety of different people. So I think that platform helps a lot. You know, people share their story, their views, who they are, and I think it's absolutely lovely. And yeah, please, we'll talk about your TikTok if anyone wants to follow you because it's beautiful. You share some lovely things. You have such amazing energy. So that's how I came across you and wanted to talk to you as well. In terms of just very, are you, what do you do for work? Are you able to talk about kind of, you don't have to say where you are or anything, but like, how does that tie into your lifestyle at the moment?
I think so. If we go back maybe 8 years ago or before that, I've always had like an office job, and I started off as a receptionist, and then I moved into facilities, and then office management, and then now I'm doing PA. So I'm a PA. I work in media. I used to do a lot in fashion. I love fashion as well. That's another thing. Fashion is it's a way of expression. So I love to express myself through what I wear. It is a lot of black, but that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So yeah, I'm a PA, and I think that definitely comes with a nurturing, caring perspective as well, because you're looking after people when it comes to diary management, maybe getting their lunch, coffees, teas, looking after their team, just kind of being a supportive person there. So I look after 4 directors. It's a very fast-paced job, but they're all parents as well, and I think that's quite important. I think is that they allow you to have time. They don't have expectations that will spill into your personal life as well, which I think is quite important. And that's what I do love about my job, is that they respect that, I am a parent. I need, my weekends and my evenings and stuff like that. So yeah, I think being a PA, there is a lot of versions of a PA, but the role that I'm in, it's, turning up in the office 3 days a week, and just being there. They know I'm around, just kind of being that supportive person, lots of communication, making sure everyone's on the same page, and, knowing their expectations of you and vice versa as well. So I think it's definitely something that you have to really be fully open to, because it can sometimes spiral when you're in this situation of, it can clash sometimes. But my role is amazing, and I absolutely feel that it is definitely a representation of me and who I am. And that's why I'm in this role.
Well, you know what, that actually makes total sense. Again, don't know you very well yet, but I can see what, the person you are at the moment, how you kind of portray yourself on TikTok, and what you're talking about as well kind of ties in. And I'm assuming, I don't like to usually make assumptions, but in this case, I guess I will a little bit, saying that, probably you and what you've gone through in life, who you are as a person as well. I don't know what you were like younger, but, the experience that you've had, which we'll talk about now in a second, probably kind of ties in where you've had to give that support to your children, through the things you've gone through and things like that. So I think it probably comes quite naturally as well.
Definitely. I think when you go through anything traumatic, the first response from you is you shield yourself, and you just want to ensure everyone else is okay. That's how I am. I'm a water sign as well. I'm a Cancer. So we're very mothering, but we don't like to feel our own emotions. I don't know if other Cancerians will relate to that, but we are known as the emotional star sign. We're very good with emotions, but we're very good at hiding our own and not listening to our own advice. So I think that's definitely something that I do a lot. Something I'm trying to be better at as well, I think, is, allowing myself to feel as well, and, dealing with those deep-rooted traumas that will surface. They will come up eventually. So I think, yeah, I'm definitely in that space where I love to look after others. I want everyone to be okay. You don't want people to feel the pain you're feeling, so you kind of shield and just put out there to make sure that everyone's okay in these instances. Yeah.
Well, that's very beautiful, and we'll talk about, I guess, the emotion side as well on this topic, because it's going to be a bit more of this topic. I think is going to be a bit more harder than some of the topics I've had so far. And it also, again, touches me quite closely. I can relate to probably what your children may have gone through. But I'll leave that over to you. So why is this topic, if you mention to the listeners and kind of what we're talking about today in more detail, and also why is this something that you wanted to talk about today?
I think I know it's definitely something I want to talk about. I think when it happened, so my eldest daughter's dad passed away when she was 6. She just turned 6. And up until that, it was kind of up and down anyway. He was going through what he was going through. We were young. So she didn't see him much. And then he passed away. So it was quite a big traumatic thing, because there's someone in your life that you kind of see but don't see, and then they're all of a sudden gone completely. I think when a child is so young, it's really hard to explain that to them. So when it first happened, I didn't tell her. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know. I was completely just in this rut of, where do I go from here? What do I need to do for her? Do I tell her? I actually went to her primary school, who were really good. They had an amazing counselling team, and they were like, you need to tell her, because she's going to feel your shift in energy. And they were completely right. She thought that she had done something to upset me, which, I made that very clear to her. You haven't done anything. Because I think at 6, you're still quite young. You don't understand, you're in that kind of child bubble, of everything, but then this big traumatic thing happens, and it gave me the most anxiety. I thought it was me next. It was so bizarre. I became extremely anxious and worried that every pain and spot on my body was me going to pass away. So I was constantly at the doctors, constantly in the hospital, everything with her as well. I just felt, I was like, I can't lose something else. I can't lose me. I can't lose this. I can't lose my daughter. So I was just in this kind of fight or flight of what do I do, and how do I get through this, and understanding, making sure she's okay while still trying to keep myself together to be her mum and be her dad as well now, So was I working? I think I wasn't in work properly. I think I was doing a bit of modelling, and I have a lot of memory blocks, which is quite interesting. So there's some stuff I still can't remember. I think I've completely shut them down, and it's probably something I need to work on. But I just remember, just kind of dropping her to school, going out all day, picking up from school, coming home, bed, just kind of having this very rigid routine that was kind of survival mode, I guess. I was still cooking dinners. I was still reading with her and doing what she needed, but I can't remember it, if that makes sense. I just remember being completely numb. And it took a while for his funeral to come around. I didn't bring her to the funeral because I felt that she was just going through too much, and she was too young, and I didn't know what to expect as well. Didn't go to a lot of funerals growing up, and it's not something I'm really comfortable with. So I just felt like I don't want to bring her into that atmosphere and environment, and it caused more trauma for her, She did go to the after party bit, and she obviously saw some other relatives and stuff, but she was really confused. She, there's people there she's never seen before. So she's like, who's this person grabbing me, cuddling me, touching my face, and I was just like, trying to shield her, and we did leave quite early because it was just too much for me and for her. But I think if you go through something like that with your child, the first thing that I think is most important is just let them know that it's happened. I know it's hard, it is difficult, it's so tough, but I think they can feel your shift. They came from you birthed them. They can feel that something's not right with mummy or something's not right with daddy, and have I done something wrong? We go into self-blame straight away for anything, don't we? We kind of think, I've done something wrong, they're upset with me, and then you're in this kind of movement of, oh my God, if I say this, will I upset them? If I don't say this, So I think it's definitely a good thing to sit down with them and just explain what's happened and allow them to feel how they feel in those moments. We all react differently. So, they might cry, they might not, they might find it funny, they might completely say nothing and just be silent and stare at you, and just, okay, and carry on. And that's absolutely fine. I think it's just being there for them. And that's kind of how, when it happened, that was the first kind of moments of it. And we kind of became this kind of joint at the hip duo of, oh my God, going everywhere together. I wouldn't let her stay anywhere. I wouldn't let her go to friends' house because I was petrified that something was going to happen to me or her. So I just couldn't detach myself from her.
That's really powerful. And you know what, when you're talking about it, it brought so much memories back from my own childhood, because I wasn't much older than your daughter when my dad passed away. I was 8 years old, right? So a bit older. But all the things you kind of just talked about, and this is very interesting, this conversation, I think, because like you were an adult at the time that happened, to you. So I when I think about my mother, of course, I could never understand, these things, So it's really insightful, because I can't, of course, say that these are some things that she's gone through, but I would imagine that any adult at that time is struggling between how do you deal with that grief when you have children? Because you like I said, I use the phrase like superwoman, because when I was growing up, that's all I saw, after my dad passed away, is this woman who never cried, she didn't, she just did everything that she could, absolutely wonderful human being, you know what I mean? She's always trying to put a brave face on, always smiling. We never saw her shouting at us or anything like that. So it was a very conflictive time for me as well as a child. When when my dad passed away, he passed away from non-Hodgkin's, so it was a cancer. And so my early memory is like, from thinking about from your daughter's perspective, maybe when being 8 years old, I can tell you that I was completely confused. I didn't know that my dad was ill. Like I maybe somewhere along the lines I thought there was something happening, but I thought everything's fine, And then one evening, I remember I was woken up, and someone said, we need to go and go to the hospital, and my dad was, of course, in the hospital before them, but it was that night I thought he's coming home, everything's fine. And then I woke up to one of my neighbors coming in and saying, we need to take you and your mom to the hospital. I was like, what's going on? And they said, well, this is the thing, like your dad is going to pass away. And I'm 8 years old. I don't understand what that is. And I remember going to the room, or close to the room. I couldn't go in there physically because I just didn't understand, but I could see like my dad was in the bed. He had all these tubes tied to himself, and things like that. And I just that wasn't my dad anymore, if that makes sense. That wasn't the image of my dad. So I didn't go, I didn't say goodbye, and it haunted me until I was 20 years old. I had suffered severe depression because I thought it was my fault as a child. I thought it was my fault my dad passed away. So it's weird how, as your child, these associations, and mom, of course, she's going home through. There's no way that she could be equally as much for me there, in a sense, you know what I mean, from a psychological sense. She doesn't know what I'm going through. She's trying to do like what you did, is like shelter her and be there and be the super mom. So I think this is it's kind of like an eerily but also healing topic that we're talking about today, in a sense, because we have the similarities but from different like different perspectives. So it's a powerful experience. So anyone who has gone through something similar, probably relates to what you and I are talking about, or whether you're a child or a parent. And I think this is why it's a very topic I wanted to talk about today. And I know we're talking about the challenge, but we're going to talk about the positives as well today, which I think there's plenty of when you have something like this as well. What was it like, just going a bit deeper in terms, like, to understand from the parent perspective, what was it like navigating with your grief? Now, I know you talked about a little bit, but how did you, from a day to day, like, did you tend to, like, after you shut the door, you kissed your child or children goodnight, did you then kind of just cry? What was it like for you after that?
I think at first I didn't cry. I think I did mourn him. He was my first love, he was my first love. I loved him a lot. It was very quick. We were young and and I was pregnant. It was like, whoa, and he was a good person. He wasn't a bad person. He was just young and confused, and I think it helps me understand my daughter in her age now, 22, because I think we're in our, this is the thing, I can't remember. So she's 22 now, and it was 6. So yeah, we were probably in our 20s. So it helps me understand, seeing my daughter now, understanding, I know it's male, female, just understanding the young mind. I think I always wanted children. I love children, and everyone knew that I would have a child young, I guess, because I was 17 when I was pregnant and I birthed her at 18. But I think you're in this young love and that person is just gone. And it's extremely, I can't even explain to you, because you're having this person's child as well, or you've had their child, sorry. So it's just a mixture of things. You're kind of thinking of the future, you know, and you're just thinking of everything. And I think in the evenings, I would just sit there and that would literally be my mind. It would just think, what about future? What about now? Is she okay? What if she needs her? What if she needs her dad? You know, at school when Father's Day came around or anything to do with parents. And, you know, that's when I think she started, as she got older, she started to feel that, hang on, there's a parent missing. You know, the first few years she kind of knew, but as she got older, it was like Father's Day. So Father's Day, I would fully, let's go for dinner or let's have a nice dinner, or, you know, you can still make a Father's Day card. You can still see it up in heaven. Do you know what I mean? Just letting her understand you can still talk about your father. It just because he's not in this life, it doesn't mean he can't see and hear you, you know? So I think it's allowing them to still do things in that perspective and on those subjects. I think don't block it. Don't let it become a block for them, and don't push down what you're feeling on them as well. I think it's hard. Don't get me wrong, it's tough. But I think you have to really allow them to feel and express how they want to. They are their own person and they have their own feelings and ways of coping mechanisms. So I think you have to really allow them. They feel safe with you when you do that. When they feel that they can express and be when in those moments, they then feel safe and trust you and will come to you for everything, you know, like me and my daughter's relationship now, she's literally my twin. Like, it's quite scary. I'm like, you look just like me, but she has traits with her dad. But, you know, to this day, she still talks to me about her father, you know, and as much as I can with the knowledge and, you know, of what I knew of him, I share, you know, we have these little moments of sharing, you know, how she's feeling, you know. I just think it's just allowing her to have that access to you. And as much as it's traumatizing for you and it's hard, just open up and let them in, you know. And I think that's something like I said, I still do that now. And I think most evenings she would be in bed. She slept in my bed, by the way, as well, because she used to have seizures. I don't think I mentioned it. She had seizures. So every time she had a seizure, I would think that would be it. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my baby, you know, because they got longer and longer as she got older. I think stress triggered them more. So, yeah, I just kept her with me at all times. You know, even still now, I think I drive her a bit insane. She's like, Mum, I'm fine. You know, when she goes out, are you okay?
Yeah.
Who are you with? Where are you going? Can you send me the address? You know?
Yeah.
I still have that bit of panic mode in me, definitely.
And you know what? It's interesting because I don't know. This is unfair to say. I don't want to say that anyone who hasn't lost something, you know, something important in your life doesn't understand what I'm about to say. But yeah. I remember that there were some people in my life who didn't understand this fear of loss. You know what I mean? I you know, from even as and this maybe comes from my mom as well. You know, because she was very much like you in the sense that she wanted to protect. You know, she was very kind of like, don't go out late. I'm pretty sure she felt very similar, you know, feelings like scared, you know what I mean? And that kind of in not a negative way, but it kind of rubbed off of me. You know, my little brother's different. My brother even is a bit slightly different than me and my mother. Me and my brother, I used to have like these panic attacks as well. Like, like if my mother went out and I didn't hear from her for 10 minutes, I would go AWOL. Yeah. You know, I would be like, something horrible's happened. It's the fear of loss. Like, and I've had to really work on that fear of loss. Anyone who's become important in my life, you know, it's constantly like, I'm always thinking, if I don't hear from them 5 minutes, you know, when they said they should be calling me, it's the automatic thought that something's happened, right? So, and you know, another saying that people say when you lose someone that's you've loved very much, it's you don't get over it. I think you learn to live with it. You know, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be there. And you and when we say, at least when I say like, I don't get over it, it doesn't mean a negative. It doesn't mean that I'm crying here every day, I'm depressed about it. It just means that I still miss them, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's fine. So I just want to say to everyone on this podcast that it's okay, you know, that if you've lost someone, it's okay to feel like that. You don't need to feel like you have to get over it, and don't let anyone tell you have to get over it.
Exactly.
So I think that's important. And then we're just talking about the emotions, because something that you said as well was interesting. And again, my mother is from a very different generation. She's 70, turning 77. She had me when she was about 35. But back then it was a different world. She also she's a Finnish woman. So culturally, back then emotions wasn't something that people, even to this day, I would say, like, the Finnish culture is a little bit more like, you don't talk about a lot of things unless you know people. But even then, it's kind of like, yeah, you just don't talk about your emotions. And I remember my mom, when I think what you said is beautiful, because you've given your child the opportunity to kind of talk about her father. And then this is like, I'm by the way, I'm dedicating this episode to my mom because she's such a fantastic woman. But yeah, she's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. But and this is what I'm saying. This is nothing against my mom. It's just interesting. There's two different like parenting styles here. There's one where even though you're going through things, you're still sharing with your child, which I think is important. Because the other thing that I've noticed, this is just from my experience in life, is that, I wanted to understand a lot about my father because I didn't remember him anymore. I was 8 years old. I don't remember how he walked, how he talked, all that stuff, just completely gone. And I remember there was a period of my life when I was about a teenager. I'm about 15 or 16, I was like really wanted to understand, like, who's my dad, like, and even then my mom, bless her, she's always had a hard time talking about it. She's always like, oh, let's talk another time, and years go by, but I can understand that. I can really understand that when you must have lost someone, like, that was her love of her life, and then she's gone through things, and she's different age gap and different cultural things. It's been very difficult for her. But my point here in this, what I'm talking about, which would be interesting to hear from your side as well, is that I think if you're able to try to communicate with your child about these things, because what happened to me is I went through this situation, this life experience, didn't understand what was happening, wasn't able to talk about it, because I also put this pressure on myself, like, like, no one else is talking about it, fine, then I'm not going to talk about it. And at age 20, it erupted. It was like a volcano, it came to a head where it just blew up, and I was, went into deep depression, all that stuff. So when should you talk about this with your child if you choose to communicate?
So yes, so I think that if you can, I definitely think you should talk to your child, with your child as soon as possible, to let them release, because you do hold it in. It is difficult. I know you're saying with your mum, sometimes she'll be like, let's talk about it later. And I did do that as well sometimes, because I was just so at capacity. I would do overtime in my own mind, just I blamed myself. I thought, it's anything I said or did, or, it's just, you just go into that self-sabotage mode, don't you? Because you're trying to understand why that happened. But I also think your child's doing that as well. So I think even if it's just sitting in the same room and, something might pop up or come on that reminds you of your dad. And I think my daughter has a lot of her dad's traits. So she's got his giggle. She walks like him. She loves to go out and listen to Bashment, and so did he. So I, when she does that, I'm like, oh, because it's not music kind of I like, so I'll kind of be like, oh, your dad liked that kind of music, and she's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, sometimes I'll just say, oh, the way you laugh, sometimes it reminds me of your dad, And I think it's, even though this happened years ago, it's letting her know that I'm okay with talking about your dad, and you can always talk to me about him as well. I think as she's got older now, she's probably cried more and released more and spoken more about it. When she was younger, she didn't really want to, and I never forced it as well. I think it's understanding not to force those conversations. Don't make them feel like they have to talk about it now. Everyone deals with things differently, so I think it's just having those boundaries with each other and understanding that a child is a human and they have their own ways of thinking and stuff. And I think just because you're their parent, you don't own them, and you don't own how they think and how they should behave. So it might not always be a positive reaction. They might lash out and become a bit aggressive. They might stop eating, or, there's so much that our bodies react to things, and I think it's just understanding and allowing and just being there, even if they're not talking, just sitting next to them and being present with them. I think you sometimes don't, you lose interest in things that you once were interested in, and that's okay as well. Don't force it. it sometimes has an attachment to that person that's passed or to a memory or something. So don't force it and don't question their decision. Just allow them to be. And just, I think as a parent, your main thing is, I mean, me as a parent, it was just more of just ensuring she's okay and she's doing okay at school, and, you know, she's eating well, and, you know, just okay, you know, as much as I knew how I was, it's making sure that she was okay too. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and you know, to think about my mom, like, she was definitely there, even though we didn't sometimes talk about, you know, these things. She was always like, it reminds me as well, she did used to always say these little things, like, you know, especially to my brother as he got older, like, you know, like, he looked like my dad. And she says to me as well, like, you know, like, you're very in a sense quiet. Like, I am quiet, like, even though I come across very bubbly, people don't think that I am, but I have this quietness, you know. And my love for music comes from my dad and my brother as well. So, you know, my mother did always kind of hit these things. But you know, as I grown up, I always thought, you know, wow, like, I wonder how that must have felt for her as well, you know, to see these similarities, you know, in your children, like, wow, they look so much like the person you love who've now is gone. That must have been, you know, very difficult as well. And then yeah, it's just interesting to me, because I don't remember, like I said, and my brother was even younger. He was 5 years younger, you know. So it must have been, and even my brother and I have two different kind of experiences, right? Like, I still somewhat remember my father a bit more, but when my brother he doesn't remember him at all, you know. So it must have been interesting for all of us in terms of the family dynamic, in terms of, like, how do we deal with this? You know, my mom is looking at us from, oh my gosh, you remind me of your father, and we're like, do we resemble our father? You know, like, what way? We're curious, we want to know, but then it's like a difficult. So my point here is, like, I'm just wondering, how did that impact your family dynamic?
I think so I think the way it changed was that I spoilt her. So she was very spoiled. I think I wanted to just provide, you know, and that was the way I coped as well with a parent going. So I thought, okay, I need to give her everything all the time, which is exhausting, if I'm honest. And it's not, I wouldn't recommend it, you know, but you have this little bit of resentment as well, which is quite interesting. I can't explain it to you, but because you see the person in your child, it takes your breath away a bit. You'll be like, oh, this is, you know, it's like the person staring at you. So it's quite an interesting feeling, which I can't explain. It's almost like, especially if you're telling them off, because you have to still discipline. If they're being naughty, you have to still discipline. And if they look at you and you're just seeing, oh my goodness, you're just like, oh, they're watching me, or, you know, you just become, it's bizarre, you know, if they're upset and sad and you see the resemblance, it's quite difficult, but you have to still, you know, not allow them to disrespect you and, you know, be a little pain in the bum. But yeah, I think it's just so interesting, you know. I think yeah, that's kind of it. It's just interesting. It's very hard to explain. I mean, my family were really good as well. I spent a lot of time. I had my own place, but I was like my mum's quite a lot as well, because I needed my mum, you know. I feel like I was being the mum to my daughter, but I needed my mum as well. I was just in pieces when I weren't in that mother mode. And she could see that, you know, but my mum was quite good at allowing me to just sit there quietly if I wanted to as well. But she would just, you know, come over with some food, or do you want to stay tonight? Do you want to stay tonight so you don't have to go home? And sometimes I would stay and sometimes I would come home, because it was hard for me to be in this space, because he was here a couple of weeks before he passed. So it was just, you know, you kind of don't want to be in spaces where someone's passed. It's really difficult to cope in that. But I think, yeah, it's really interesting. But I think you've got to remember, it's not the child's fault. It's not their fault. They look like their dad, because they are half of them. But you kind of find peace with it as well. You kind of feel like, okay, they're still with me. So that's where you kind of get that resentment. But then you also like, there's that abundance of joy and love as well, because you feel like you're still seeing them, because you can start to forget, what do they look like again? And, you know, memories are quite an interesting thing, because we're constantly throughout the day being fueled new memories. So I think it's quite hard to hang on to things sometimes, I think. So seeing that daily, it's quite a soothing thing as well. You know, you kind of up and down emotionally with it, but yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing as well with the memories, like we talked earlier, like there's memory blocks, right? And then I think there's sometimes, I read an interesting article about like you said, like the amount of memories that we're creating daily, and then how memories can get morphed, or like they actually they're not actually what they were, if they make sense. Like if you spoke to yourself, like let's say 7 years ago, what you said then for memory might be slightly different than it is now, because it keeps evolving, which is really weird in a sense. Do you know what I mean? So and moments like that, I'm like, for instance, you know, me and my brother, we have slightly different memories. Like my brother remembers, like, for instance, my dad bought us a dog, a sweet little dog called Max. And I remember we were having this argument, we were children, that my brother was like, oh, I remember I went and picked up the dog with my dad. I was like, no, you didn't. You were home with us. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but he remembered, his memory was he was in the car picking up the dog. And then he remembered that we had 4 or 2 doors or 4 doors, and I can't even remember how many doors we had in the car. And I was like, if he said 2, I said no 4, or vice versa. You know what I mean? It was like really weird. Yeah, when you're talking even with my brother, you know, like how does that even happen? But I think that's what loss does as well. You know, it kind of, for your own safety, you have to block certain things. And I this is like the question I want to have here. Do you think when we're like coping through this kind of you know, even as a child, I was a child, you're a mother, for your child, do you think it's healthy to maybe, you know, like bring up all the memories in a sense? Because I think communicating about your, you know, your life, and I think it's important, but is it healthy to?
I think it depends, because I think it depends, like, in what aspects. I think to kind of, not jumping ahead a bit, but obviously I was single for quite some time after that happened, and then I got into a relationship, and obviously, you know, when you're meeting someone, you're kind of like, I have a child, and then, you know, they do this, oh, where's the father? And, you know, you then have to be like, oh, the father's passed away. I think it just depends how safe you feel with exposing that information, because some people can use it against you, as, you know, just as blackmail or clickbait. I don't know. They're just, some people are not very nice. Their intentions are bad with information you've given them, I think. But then I think if you're in a situation where you feel safe and it's maybe going to help you or help others, I think that's okay. I think it's definitely analysing and knowing as and when to share. But also holding on to memories. Again, it's like, what are you doing to yourself with holding on to it? Are you self-sabotaging? Are you blaming? Or are you using it as, oh, I remember that this person loved red roses, so I'm going to buy some today, and that makes me feel close to them and warm. So I think it's definitely good, but it can be bad. I think if in a bad way, if you're hanging on to a memory because maybe you had an argument, which is what I did. We had an argument, and oh my goodness, I felt so guilty of the things I said. But he said horrible things too, but I was still here, and I just felt like, that's so mean of you, Natalie. Why did you say those things? You know, and it ate me up for years and years and years. I honestly just felt so guilty, because that's the last memory he had of me. And I just felt really guilty that he had passed away with that memory of me, even though he was probably fine. But, you know, that's the last thing I remember saying. So I think it's definitely something that you need to, it's all part of the healing, and it's all part of the, I think, understanding what your intention is with those memories and how other people are going to use that as well. Because, you can be mean to yourself, and then there is mean people out there as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've gone through that as well. Yeah, I've had my fair share. Yep, exactly, and learn my lessons as well, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting, and just on the memory side of things as well. Like you were saying that, you know, I remember there was these these guidebooks that some people used to talk about when I was younger, like, oh, you know, like don't say anything nasty to anyone ever because it could be the last thing that you say. And yeah, fair, absolutely. But life is life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We never know when our time is up, you know, which is probably like a good thing in a sense. Otherwise, we wouldn't live our life in full if we did know.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you know, it's the things that, you know, like I said to you as well. Like my last memory of my father was I didn't go in the room, you know, and I blamed myself. I was like, oh, because I didn't say goodbye to him, it must have been my fault. So again, years I put this blame on me, and then I realized at the age of 27 or something like that, after I had therapy, is like, my gosh, I've been so unkind to myself for so long.
Absolutely.
You know, because like you were saying as well, you put that memory, you know, haunted you for a long time, and then it's hard to be kind to oneself after that, you know.
It really is. It really is. Yeah.
And I'm just, my question for you is like, do you know, did you talk about with your daughter like what her last memory was about her dad? Did that ever come up in like of like guilt on her side? Because curious to see if there are other people who kind of felt like me as well, in a sense.
I think we've definitely had these conversations. She had literally just turned 6, so it was a couple of days after her birthday he passed. So she doesn't have a great deal of memory. So I do remind her of, you know, she's still got the toys that he bought her. She's kept those, so she's got those still. And I always remind her of that. And, you know, I let her know what he enjoyed and stuff like that. It's just, she actually enjoys the same things. It's really, really like lovely to see, actually. I think she just has guilt because she can't remember. And I just remind her that you were basically 5 because you just turned 6, you know. And if I always say to her, obviously I've got another daughter now, and I'm like, look at when Jess was 5, you know, you're still a toddler, basically. You just can speak, still like blah, 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 but you can just talk, and you're still in this kind of baby toddler mode. So I just kind of explain to her that it's okay to not remember, but as much as I can, I will remind you. If you have any questions and there's anything I can answer, I will. But I have memory blanks as well. So it is sometimes quite interesting because we're sitting there just kind of like, you know, how does this tie in? And then we, you know, kind of laugh about it and stuff. But I think it's just letting her know that it's okay to not remember, because I think you feel guilty for that, don't you? Oh my God, I can't remember them. You know, so bad of me, da 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 da. And you know, that's absolutely fine. That's how the brain works, you know, and it could just be a memory block. It may unblock, it may not. It just depends on what your body wants to do. Yeah.
I'm curious to understand as well, before we look at the positives, in terms of what kind of resources did you have and your family have when this happened? Because, you know, when this happened for me, you know, this was in the early 90s. It was, therapy was more of like a stigma thing, right? If you went to therapy, you're crazy. So there was no services for helping, you know, grieving mothers, single parents, or children from this. What about you? Was something given to you? Did you feel like you took it? And if not, I'm curious to hear, like, what were your thoughts there?
Do you know what? Thinking about it, I didn't do anything for myself. I didn't go to my daughter went to therapy she had a counsellor at school. They were really good at the school. And then she had, a few years later, she had some separate therapy on it when she was in secondary school. And then for me, I don't know, I didn't do anything. I probably feel like now, probably the last, how can I say, maybe like the last 4 years-ish, is 5 years maybe, is where I've actually really started to do that deep, dark shadow work, I think, because after the passing of my daughter's dad, my granddad passed. And then I had quite a heavy, long relationship after that, which wasn't, you know, the greatest relationship. And I was just absolutely exhausted. And I think your body forces itself into that mode if you keep compressing. So I think that's what happened. I had no choice. My body was like, Natalie, this is the time now. You're not listening to us, so we're going to take you through those motions. And it was very bizarre. I was made redundant from a job, and I was kind of home for 5 months, and basically had nothing but myself. Facing yourself, aren't you? So I think I kind of was doing lots of yoga and just kind of in my own space and acknowledging, like actually looking at myself, not looking past myself as we do in mirrors and stuff. So really just being like, what does Natalie need and what does Natalie want? And I think that's when I really realized I have been not neglecting myself, because I was doing stuff I love and still doing me, but I think I was probably emotionally maybe just suppressing a lot and not allowing myself to feel those things. So I think it's a lot of stuff that I do now where I kind of have slow days. You don't have to always be on. You can have off days. Allowing those off days where I cannot be bothered. Maybe I stay in bed all day. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll have a bath. Maybe I'll have a bath later. Just kind of allowing myself to be and feel. And I wouldn't recommend not having therapy. I probably needed it, if I'm honest. I remember going out quite a lot and just drinking lots because that was my way of. I was enjoying it, woo woo, party, but the next day I'd feel horrible because, but I think, don't get me wrong, I wasn't like an alcoholic, and I'm not saying that that's not a thing that can happen, because it can, but I was definitely in this kind of spiral of autopilot numb mode where I just kind of go to work, go out, be a mum, and just not having days to pause, just always, I was working loads. I was doing a lot of modelling actually, which was great. I was travelling with modelling. I had a lot of model friends that knew that he had passed, and they would ask me how I am. But oh yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Don't want to talk about it. Just, yeah, fine. Get on to the next subject. I think when you keep yourself busy, you've got no time to think about how you're feeling, have you? And it was more me making sure that my daughter was okay. I wanted to make sure she was okay, and that was the important thing. It's like, yeah, I'm fine. I want to make sure she's okay. So yeah, that's kind of where I was with it. I just feel like I do remember I didn't cry a lot, but I did cry a bit. I think having a young child when that happened was very hard, because having a child anyway, when you're not going through a loss or anything, is hard, but adding a loss, it's even more hard, and you're kind of in this mode of providing. So, and I think that becomes maybe a bit of your therapy, because you're giving. But then what you got to remember is that you've got to give some to yourself and not just give it all away. You have to make time for yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's, it's such a difficult one. I know other people as well who've lost, very important people in their life. And I think that's the thing. What I think, for me, it's very important not to judge anyone when they're going through whatever they're going through in life.
Yeah.
Because everyone has a different coping mechanism. When I lost my father, for me, my coping mechanism is I wasn't able to voice out what I needed to, because it just wasn't possible, for many different reasons. I found solace in food. I've always struggled all my life through with weight. And when people kind of point the finger as like, oh, it's just so easy for you to do this and that, just exercise, do that. And I try to say, look, it's not that simple sometimes, because it's a mental thing, and now I'm healed. I've healed so much. The last thing I'm going to focus now is on, the getting more healthy and things like that. But people like that. My point here is like, it's sometimes people are so easy to come and tell you as well, like, oh, don't do drinking, don't do this and that when you've lost. You need to focus on yourself. That doesn't. It comes later when you realize that it comes later, because you have to have and healing is like, I don't know, it's funny, but it's like there is no time limit when you need to heal something like this. It's different for everyone, right? So I think that's important to remind yourself at some point. It's like, it's okay to grieve. If it takes 20 years, it takes 20 years, until you come to some sort of realization. You have to be kind to yourself. It takes 5 years, that's fine. That's not bad either. You know what I mean? But it's the point where sometimes when people try to push a timeline for someone or give them that advice on doing it, that's when I think it's like, it's kind of like you said as well, you didn't let your child, you didn't force things upon them. Everything takes time, everything has phases. So I guess as a single parent, I'm just wondering, did you get this kind of advice as well from other people because you were a single parent? you know, like, you need to be this as a single mother, you need to do this, you shouldn't be out drinking, you know, things like, I'm just curious, like,
Yeah, definitely. Oh
what
my
happened?
God. I think people are so judgmental. I think the fact that I was young, and I was a single mum, everyone had an opinion, and I'm always pretty much like, I don't care. Like, that is me, but I do care. So I think as long as you know you're doing what's right for you and your child, I think that's the best thing that you can do. And you have to just mute people out because it can become quite overwhelming. I think, I had people say, "Oh, well, if you didn't have her so young," and I'm like, "Well, that wouldn't have changed anything. I was meant to go through this in this life cycle, and that's what's happened, and it's okay. I'm going to get through this. I just need some time. Um, but yeah, people are judgmental. My family were lovely though. Like my mum was amazing. She could see probably when I was having bad moments, and she would, come round or bring me round there, and she would babysit while I would go out, and she would constantly be messaging me. I would go with my sister as well, so it's not like I was going out alone, but I needed that outlet as well. You have to let out, because I wasn't crying and I wasn't probably talking as much as I should have. I just needed another release, and going out dancing and having a drink was something that helped me. I look back at photos now and I laugh about it because, I had a great time. It was fun. It was amazing. But, I don't think I was really that kind to myself as well. I think I put myself under so much pressure to make sure that my daughter was okay and, externally to look a particular way because people judge. I think you do crumble. You do crumble. But yeah, I think I definitely probably should have spoke about it more. I had some more therapy or something when it happened, because I do think other certain things probably wouldn't have happened. I probably wouldn't have got into certain relationships because I would have seen,
Yeah.
this isn't good for you, Natalie. But I think, it's happened. So, it's made me who I am today. And absolutely, you just become wiser, don't you? You learn. But I also do think that this is probably going to sound extremely holistical when I say this, but I think you're not given anything that God doesn't think that you can deal with. And that's kind of my outlook on a lot of things. Even when things go terribly wrong, I'm like, okay, there's a lesson here to be learned, or there's something that I'm missing. So what is it? And I kind of try and just look through and find the positive, even if it's extremely turbulent. I'm just like, what can I pull from this to help me through this, even though it's quite tough? So I think, that's kind of where my headspace is.
Well, it's exactly where my headspace is as well. And this is like, again, this is why I wanted to do this podcast, because, I've had other things happen in my life besides my father's. Well, I've had really bad relationships. I've had other losses as well, suffered from all kinds of things. And even though they were very extremely difficult, I'm still here, right?
Absolutely.
And I now have worked so much on myself that I can see the positives. So that means that you're not going to necessarily see, the light at the end of the tunnel when you're going through that. Of course not.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Hopefully, if you do what you need to do to heal yourself and do what you can, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Which leads us to the positive stuff, because the stuff earlier was more about talking about what happened and things like that.
Yes.
What are some of the things and hopes and dreams for yourself, Natalie, and for your children as you look ahead based on the experience? Like, what are some of the things that you want to do? What are you excited about?
I think the things that I want to do and excited about, I think I'm doing some of them already. I always just try and look at things from other people's perspective, I think. So I try and make my girls understand that you have like we were saying, you have your opinion and your way, but other people do too. And I think you can talk about things in a communicate in a non-aggressive way to understand people and just things in life and what's happening. You're going to lose people in life, whether it's they pass away or you just lose contact with people. That's okay. We evolve, we grow. And I always feel that you have to put yourself first in everything. That's what I try to do now. I used to be an extreme people pleaser. And I think that was because of trauma as well. So I was just yes. And, it burnt me out. I was burnt out and exhausted. I look back at old photos, I'm like, oh my goodness. But, again, here we are now, But I think putting yourself first, speaking your truth, but doing it with kindness, I think that definitely takes you a long way. There's nothing wrong with speaking up and having a voice, but do it in a way that's empathetic and, non-aggressive, and just kind of a way to help someone understand your point and your perspective. I think that's definitely something that I do a lot of the time, actually. And sometimes as well, you don't actually need to say anything. Sometimes, we have this thing where we want to defend and become defensive of things. And sometimes is the other person listening to you, or they just want to get into an argument, whatever. So I think it's just understanding yourself and other people as well, I think. So that's kind of, I want to do more of that. I'm definitely doing some of it now, but it's the way I kind of, with my daughters, if they come home to me and say, oh, this happened today or whatever, okay, I want to know the full story. I just don't want to know your side. So what did they do, and what did this, and then I'm like, okay, so how do you feel about that? So I always try and tell me how you feel. Then I'll try and explain to them the other person's side, because I'm an outsider coming in on this situation. I wasn't there. And then I explain why, or potentially why they could be feeling that way, Everything's emotions and feelings of everything, how we react, we get triggered, and it's, walking around like triggered people. So I think you have to know your triggers and think, why am I being triggered by someone telling me no? Because people don't like being told no. So I think it's really hard. I still get triggered by a lot of things. And I think once you just become more self-aware and stuff, things just flow easier and life becomes a bit easier, I think, definitely. But yeah, it's just, again, it's that whole giving yourself time and, just taking things a bit slower and not reacting and stuff. You'll get to a better answer than instantly reacting and answering and being in that triggering response mode is not the best.
Yeah, and I, again, can completely relate to that. I've definitely been on the same boat there. Definitely a massive people pleaser, always saying yes to everything, because I think it's part of the lost as well, as like, I guess extent comes like, if I say no, I might lose that person by saying no. It's a really weird feeling, So I always said yes, and I was constantly exhausted as well, because some of the things I didn't want to do, like I didn't want to always go out. I didn't always want to see someone. I wanted to stay home, but I couldn't say no. So, it's interesting that, and for a long time I thought it was just me, I thought, well, it must be everyone, or is it just me? It's like these weird things, but it's important, I think. And what you, like I said this to my brother after he got divorced as well, and was going through a different time. We're talking about my dad and all these, we never talked before and so deeply. Like, he's now my best friend. I mean, he's always been my best friend, but now, like, really my best friend. I love him to bits. And I remember I told him as well, like, it's one of the things I think it's important for us as adults, right, to remember. And this is a different topic for a different podcast, but I think there's a difference when we say, like, being adult, what does that mean? But I think it's about being emotionally mature to know when to react on something, because, hey, we have feelings, we're going to feel angry, we're going to feel sad, we're going to feel like, oh, I could just ring someone's, that's fine. That's fine. It's if you react, that's the thing that you need to think about, No,
I was going to say, and then you've got that, you go into that self-sabotage mode because you regret the reaction. And so
what other kind of valuable lessons would you say that this experience has taught you, specifically you and you as a single parent?
I think it's shown me that, like we were saying, I think we said it at the beginning, you have to just live life to the fullest, because you just don't know. I think, you have to just be you, just be yourself, because you don't know what tomorrow brings, I don't know what next week brings. I think, you know, one minute it was fine and he was here, and the next minute was gone, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to reverse that or bring him back. So I think this day and age, I'm always ending my evenings just feeling fully fulfilled and content, because I've done what I wanted to do, whether it's do nothing and just sit at home in my PJs and watch telly and have a cup of teas and biscuits and get McDonald's, or if it's go out and, you know, do something, I don't know, go cinema, whatever, or go buy some shopping. You know, I think you have to just make sure that you're doing things for yourself. You know, it's okay to be a little bit selfish. You can put yourself first, and as long as you're not out there causing chaos and mayhem in a bad way, you can do it in a good way. You can go out and spread loads of love and tell everyone, you look beautiful, you look pretty, I like your makeup, I like your shoes. You're making someone's day, you know. You don't know what they're going through, and that could really make their day, you know. That's kind of, if I've learned anything from that, it's just that you just don't know what can happen. And I don't mean it in a way to try and make you feel anxious or worried. It's in a way of like, what are you waiting for? Like, just do it. Just do it. You know, if you want to write a book, do it. Start journaling, write down everything every day. And even if it doesn't make sense, just write it. And then you'll come back and you'll edit that soon. And then voila, once you've edited it, you've got a book. There you go. See, you wrote a book, you know.
And my last question to you, really, Natalie, is before I say thank you for this amazing chat with you, what makes you laugh and what brings you joy in life?
Oh, there's so much. I love that I'm still here now and I can tell the story, because there was some dark times as well, you know. I think I'm grateful for the people that have stood by me and helped me through as well, and that are still in my life this day and age. I have a lovely partner now who is amazing to both my girls, and I'm grateful for him as well. I'm grateful for my daughters. My eldest daughter is a Libra, and I'm like, she humbles me on the daily. My youngest daughter's a Leo. They're just amazing. Sometimes I'm like, wow, these are my daughters, you know, that they bring me so much joy in so many ways. I always say thank you for choosing me as your mother to them, because, you know, there's been tough times, but there's been lots of great times as well. So I'm just grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything we have as well. You know, we don't have a lot, but I love what we have, you know. But it's always a thing of don't take nothing for granted as well, because you just, again, you don't know, you know. So I think, I'm just trying to teach them that way of life, you know, and to just embrace every moment, every day as much as you can.
Yeah, that's super important. And this is to my mom. I'm saying this now because I know she's going to be listening. I'm very grateful for, you know, my mother as well. You know, when we were growing up, we went through a lot of difficult things. We had to move to a different country, for us kids at least. And my mom has always been that superwoman, always will be. You know, I'm very grateful for everything, because we didn't have a lot, but she always did the best that we could always have amazing, you know, days. Our Christmases, like, were absolutely perfect and everything. And it's not about the gifts, you know, it's not about the gifts, it's about the feeling that we always had as a family unit. And you know, my mom has always taught us as well, I don't take anything for granted.
Yeah, honestly, I do want to shout out my mum as well, because honestly, she has been through a lot as well. And sometimes I look at her and I'm just like, wow. You know, she's living her life now at 60, 61. How's my mum? I can't remember. But it's been lovely, and I want to thank your mum as well, and thank you, because this has been so soothing and so like heartwarming. Like talking.
Thank you. That means a lot, and I'm glad that was the feeling as well. And definitely the same here. And this is for every mother, father, any single parent, anyone who's lost anyone. This is for all of you, and this is for your loved ones. So thank you. It's a very special podcast episode for me. Definitely. I know it was for you as well, Natalie. So thank you. Thank you. And you're welcome anytime. We'll definitely have many more topics to discuss, I think.
Yes, definitely.